Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. So today we're looking to discuss technology innovations available on the market centered around the industrial water space. Now, this webinar is brought to you in partnership with Smart Water Magazine. We're live on Crowdcast, and I think we're also live on LinkedIn. Anybody that is on LinkedIn, please do follow the link to the Crowdcast, and you can get involved in any of the Q&A sections that we are sort of pushing. So my name is Lyle King. We're joined by Will Sarni, Walid, Khoury, and John McClean. And the main points that we're going to be discussing today are technology innovations that are helping industrial water facilities around the world promote water sustainability and ultimately mitigate the impacts that were very prevalent as a water crisis. Now, a small disclaimer, and this is something that I mentioned on our previous webinar, is that this is not us pointing the finger at industrial facilities saying that they are the ones that are using all the water in the world. Obviously, it's a complex solution to a complex problem, but ultimately, it's focusing on a niche within that problem, within the water scarcity sector. So, as a quick introduction, I'm going to pass through to each of our panelists. For an introduction to themselves and the work that they do. So we'll start with Will. Will, if you want to have a quick introduction to yourself.
Sure. Lyle, thanks for the opportunity to be here today and have a conversation with colleagues. So Will Sarni, I'm a water strategy advisor. I work with U.S. and non-U.S. multinationals on corporate water strategy. So water stewardship, but also I would say encouraging companies to engage more on innovation in technology, business models, partnerships, and so on, which we'll get into. Roughly the other side of our practice, and what I focus on is working with water technology startups and early growth stage companies, mostly digital technology companies. So I've got a real passion for the digital transformation of the sector. I'm an author. I've written 5 books on water and working on one right now on digital water technologies. So happy to be here again.
Great stuff. And we'll pass on to Walid. Again,
Thank you, Lyle. Thanks, Lyle, for the invite. Glad to be with you all today. So my name is Walid Khoury. I've been in the industry for 20 years, studied water, so it's kind of, I'm passionate about it. And I've worked for Fortune 150 companies all my career. So mainly companies like GE, Arnalco, and lately Danaher. So what I've been focusing on lately is trying to understand how can we sort out all the challenges of the water industry through collaboration, innovation, and also applying the digital tools. And in parallel, I'm helping small startups in Africa, mainly through impact investing opportunities.
Great stuff. And yeah, John, last but certainly not least, if you want a quick introduction.
Hello, Lyle. Thank you for the opportunity, first of all. My name is John McClean. I am the head of innovation and technology for Evoqua Water Technologies. On any given day, I will work with parts per trillion of contaminants for semiconductor rinse water and pounds per gallon coming out of coal ash ponds. So we have an incredible diversity of interest and application. We work with low strength, high volume wastes and high strength, low volume wastes. The extractables from the waste streams are becoming very much more in focus. And there's an emphasis on renewable natural gas coming off some of the high strength wastes. PFAS and the contaminants emerging concern are now prevalent, not just municipally, but industrially as well. I am a physicist. I'm a chartered physicist. I have a PhD in organizational leadership. I'm a lifelong yachtsman, spent all my life racing sailboats, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So, I mean, let's get straight into it. Like I say, the reason that we're here is to talk through technology innovations that are available on the market today. Obviously, we'll move on to maybe technology innovations that may be available in the future, where the future may be, what the industry holds in the future. But to start things off, what solutions currently are available that help industrial facilities either reduce water consumption or ultimately reuse and recycle, wastewater streams? And ultimately, what are our industrial facilities doing to promote water sustainability, or what solutions can be available to promote sustainability? As I mentioned as well, I'd like this to be a dialogue, so feel free, someone can to jump in to take the lead on this one.
I think probably the biggest thing is how industrial users think about water, Lyle. They've stopped buying components. The old models of equipment vendors selling pieces of equipment really are starting to draw to a close now. Industrial users increasingly want the convenience, the elegance, and the simplicity of buying water by the kilogallon. They want operators to run water plants for them, and that puts a whole new emphasis on waste, on value reclamation. It changes completely how the supply side of the industry works. So outsourcing water is probably the biggest change I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a lag. So I'll jump in, John, and just build on what you're talking about. My intro, I talked about innovation in the water sector as part of a corporate strategy. And I think water as a service is an interesting trend that, in our view, has only gained more traction during the pandemic in a way. So thinking about water, maybe not as a, water treatment, other water technologies, not as a core competency that companies need to invest in, but something that they can outsource to companies like yours. For me, I look at it as what are the drivers for the industrial sector in general, and then specifically the various verticals. So, consumer packaged goods, food and beverage in particular, what's going on in the information communication technology sector as they move more towards, water stewardship and water strategy, and how does that translate into innovation broadly, but technology in particular. And I think digital really fits in nicely in terms of connecting a corporate water strategy to actual technology deployment, everything from watershed through operations, and in some cases connectivity to customers and consumers. So I think, pretty clearly much has changed over the past several months, and the pandemic has been a trend accelerator with the digital technologies that we're seeing, everything from earth observation technologies to, IoT, AI applications within facility operations.
Yeah, I agree with Will and John. So basically, what's happening is that with the COVID, of course, people became more receptive to the digital world. And specifically earlier, it was like the industrial sector was less reluctant to change compared to, let's say, for example, in municipal sector. The challenge was that in their day-to-day operations, operators, engineers, utility managers in industrial sectors, they don't have really the time and the luxury of understanding what's happening in the outside world, outside of their core manufacturing, which is basically manufacturing their own products. And today we're seeing more and more requests and awareness about new technologies to be embedded in these plants. So I'll give you an example. Like we mentioned the outsourcing earlier, it was like more a trend happening in Europe, or let's say in the US, in developed economies, basically in Asia, some of the developed economies in Asia. And now we're seeing the shift more also happening in developing economies, where customers are saying, you know what, I don't want the headache of managing my water treatment in the plant. Let me offload this to someone else. It will take time, but it's kind of moving in this right direction. The other opportunity that and technology that's available and it's really yet untapped is managing to leverage all the level of data that they have available today in their plants and try to get something meaningful out of it, so they can make the treatment loop shorter and smaller. So earlier they would look at the water as incoming to the plant, being used and then discharged. But with the data and level of data available today, there are a lot of small loops that you can generate within the industrial plant before discharging it.
That's right. I agree, Walid. You know, it makes you really think about every product as a service in waiting, right? You know, it makes you really look at the service element of how the industry is moving. You know, we are increasingly censoring out products. So these products throw off data. We then have to capture the data. We then have to, you know, use machine learning, artificial intelligence, advanced pattern recognition software type techniques to make the data into information. And then we have to work out what's that telling us, where's the value in that? And then, you know, what we realize is there's no more break glass in emergency. You know, this is now always on in terms of biosecurity, in terms of sensing, in terms of knowing. We can't allow resin vessels to deplete to zero. You know, we have to know, so we have to understand the depletion algorithm, and it really puts an onus on the supply side to be ready and capable. You know, and it poses challenges because the workforces are aging, and so we need to, you know, we are now equipping some of our service techs with glasses that look a lot like yours. And these are augmented reality glasses, you know, where we can see through the lens to see what they're looking at. And then we can transmit an image to the screen, to the inside of the lens, to tell them what to do. You know, so it's moving very quickly. It's very exciting.
So to jump in then, you mentioned, you know, an aging workforce in particular, but what other challenges, you know, and when we refer to industrial facilities, it really is water intensive industries, and it encompasses a whole range of different verticals. But what are the main challenges for these facilities in implementing a solution or technology, or, you know, whatever the sort of technology is? What are the main challenges they face when actually sort of implementing them, you know, that is in an effort to become more sustainable? You know, what are the main challenges there?
Could I just add to that? Since Walid and John are, you know, very much in the technology piece, and I'm glad you both brought up the discussion of workforce and how important that is. It just seems that in some ways is the missing piece. We talk about technology, we talk about digital technologies as being this, you know, panacea, but I think the companies that are successful are the ones that really pay attention to the issue that both of you brought up, which is the workforce.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, certainly. So I suppose that moving it on, you know, as I was mentioning just before, you know, what are the main barriers, perhaps, or the main challenges that these industrial facilities are having when implementing these technologies? You know,
there's challenges and barriers, right? None of this is easy. You know, you think about some of the challenges. No one wants to be first. You know, we are managing water. You can't make beer without water. You can't make cosmetics without water. So there's a huge amount of risk. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, you know, the millennials, the current affluent buyers, the future buyers want to buy from sustainable companies. You know, corporate social responsibility, sustainability is much, much more important than ever it was. I think we all realize now it's a circular world. And, you know, and we water professionals, we've known for a long time that there is no new water. All the water that ever was exists on the planet now. You know, that there will be no more water. All we have is what we've got right now.
And I think, John, the point that you brought in about the consumer today being aware. So to give an example, you know, I do a lot of LinkedIn work, and I mean, there was a webinar organized by one of the companies about PFAS, you know, and all the microplastics also polluting and so on. And they posted a post just ranking the companies who pollute the most microplastics, you know, the consumer companies. And surprisingly, this post went viral. It in 24 hours, it got above 1 million views. I mean, who would have thought that a microplastics webinar could generate such a impressive?
Exactly. Exactly. And Walid, to that point, we work with some very large laundries and laundrettes. They are major microplastics emitters, and they're also major PFAS emitters because they're laundering garments that are made with PFAS. So it's revelation that they aren't measuring the PFAS in the water coming in, but they're faced with a major discharge. So as we recirculate the water, polish it up, and send it back to them, that becomes a challenge for us. So it's a whole new world. It's very exciting.
Correct.
To what extent then could the regulators play a part in this? Because ultimately, it's the discharge back into a given system that, ultimately has quite a big impact on it. So to what extent can regulators and governments around the world play a part in forcing people's hands ultimately?
I think.
Did you really use the word forcing?
I think regulators. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Walid.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I'll jump in since I broke the train of thought here. Sorry. My point of view, I think you've seen me talk about water as a wicked problem. And, the public sector is one of the key stakeholders in solving wicked water problems. I think the public sector has a long way to go in terms of innovating very broadly in terms of not just more regulations, but really thinking about, allocation, not over allocating water, driving reuse, recycling, and efficiency. So I think the public sector has an enormous opportunity to help solve water scarcity and water quality problems without, in quotes, forcing.
Yeah, maybe.
I think they have a challenge. Like the challenge for a regulator is how low you can force the regulations. What are the limits? I mean, ultimately, the role of the government is to drive economic growth. And if you keep tightening the regulations, ultimately all your manufacturing facilities will move to other countries where it's less stringent. And this is what we're seeing. So either countries that have less regulations stringent are less enforceable. And there need to be a balance. And it's not an easy task. I mean, if you're a regulator, really, it's not an easy task today to manage.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot more initiatives being put in place by the large corporations. You're seeing sustainability measures implemented into CSR targets, for example, where they will say, in a given time frame that they're going to reduce their water consumption by however much. It obviously varies company to company. So is it more on the corporation's hands the corporation themselves to reduce their consumption?
Well, if you think about what the capitalists in the world, the entrepreneurs, they are realizing now that there's real value in some of these waste streams. That there is no more wasted water. There's no more. We aren't dumping water, using it once through. Nature doesn't waste any water. So we're realizing now that there's real value. We can extract nitrogen, phosphorus. We can get the grit. We can get. We know that the energy. All the energies in the solids and all the nutrients are in the green or the yellow water. So we know we can get this out. There's value in that. That will help. This reminds me of quality in the 1970s. It's everyone's problem, but no one's responsibility. We have to. There's no silver bullet, Lyle. I don't think there's a simple answer. I think we have to, take a number of steps to fix this.
What would you say those steps are then? What are the
Well, look, listen to people like Will Sarni. He knows what he's talking about. This is the kind of forum we need. The markets will be able to dictate much of this. They'll reward the companies who do it well. They'll punish those who don't. The principle of polluter pays has worked well. Now the polluter won't sell product. we have to be sustainable. So it's all about the macro drivers of the markets. These are the people. Yes, we have to give everybody clean, wholesome, safe water. Of course we do that. That's a given right. For the developed markets, we need to make sure that those companies cannot discharge and pollute.
Hey, John, thanks for the compliment. You bring up another important point, the connectivity to brands and consumers and customers as a driver for action. And, I hate to keep coming back to the pandemic, but I think pretty clearly it has raised even more awareness of the importance of water and also what companies are doing with regards to the social sustainability aspect of their strategy. And for the longest time, environmental was it, climate change, water to some degree, waste. Now, all of a sudden, consumers and customers and investors are paying attention to, okay, what are you doing with regards to social impact, access to, safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I think that's pretty exciting in terms of how do you build that into a water strategy, corporate water strategy that drives value, and then what are the technologies that companies can deploy, which comes from both of you, to prove that they're actually reducing their use, recycling, reusing water, delivering innovation with respect to sanitation and hygiene. I think it's a huge driver right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So Andreas just raised a good point then, that the technological solutions that are available, to combat the microplastic problem and the PFAS problem. So what are those technologies that are available right now?
Well, look, in terms of PFAS, we can sequester them, we can absorb them with resins or carbons, we can blow them apart, we can defluorinate them with various advanced oxidation processes. So we can use supercritical water, very high pressure, very high temperature. We can burn them. We can, there's various ways we can destroy them. They were designed to resist oxidation, so they take a lot of energy. They're very expensive. This is not a trivial issue. This is a very complicated, very, very persistent problem. The PFAS is well, isn't a new contaminant. We're working with that. The microplastics is again, a whole different topic. We're seeing now with some of the biological processes in wastewater plants, we're seeing horizontal gene transfer. We're seeing protein fragments emanating from microorganisms which themselves have become tolerant to antibiotics being sent forward. And then when species on the other side engulf these, they then become tolerant to antibiotics. So there's a lot of truly emerging issues that we're seeing, which makes the field so complex and fascinating.
Yeah. And I agree with John, Lyle, that the technology is here. So we have all the technology to be able to treat any type of water. And as a water industry, we've been quite innovating. I mean, companies like Evoqua and so on have developed really very good technologies to be able to treat the toughest water. I think where we struggle more is on the adoption side. So as it was mentioned earlier, they are slow, to adopt. And like we talk about emerging contaminants, none of them is really emerging. I mean, they've been here for 30, 40, 50 years. We've been talking about them. But the will to get rid of them through regulations, as Will mentioned, is not yet there, absolutely, to be able to really, solve the problem. And it has a cost. I mean, ultimately, somebody has to pay for this cost.
Yeah, that raises quite an interesting point, actually. On a previous webinar, and this moves into the sustainability approach of a brand or a company, was that a particular company may be given certain cost savings if they are sort of reaching certain sustainability targets, which was a really interesting point. And I suppose it's in follow on to what you were saying, Will, in that it's there needs to be an incentive for a private organization, you know, to reduce their water consumption. Because at the end of the day, it's a capitalist market at the end of the day. So,
yeah, from my perspective, the incentives are there. And if you align your corporate water strategy with business value creation, you've got a better shot at investing in actions, programs, and technologies. If it is a CSR, check the box exercise, it gets the appropriate level of investment. But if it drives business continuity, business growth, connectivity to consumers and customers and investors, it's a whole different perspective. And there's some interesting examples out there where companies have absolutely aligned it with their business strategy and are doing, taking on activities that go well beyond their water footprint. And, you know, I view that as really encouraging. So the incentives are there. I think it's, you know, for the three of us as practitioners to, you know, frame it that way. And, you know, I think we all do pretty clearly. So.
Sorry, Walid, you go ahead.
No, I'm just agree with you, Will. I mean, unfortunately, still today is CSR type check the box. The more we can move it towards a full integrated strategy, it will make a difference. You're absolutely spot on.
I was going to add, don't underestimate, and I know around this table we don't, but don't underestimate how long it takes to get innovation into markets. You know, in the water space, it can take a decade, maybe 15 years to get adoption, you know, so it takes an inordinately long time. Now, I do think, as Will, as you said, I do think this pandemic has changed things. I think it's greatly accelerated the digital journeys many businesses are following. And I do think it'll accelerate, you know, willingness to adopt new ways of working. You know, because you think 6 months ago, 9 months ago, few of us were working from home like we are now. You know, a salesman can't call on customers like they used to call on customers. It means that we have to find different ways of working. And it's the same for our industrial customers as well. You know, they have to find it, and they are themselves very innovative.
Yeah.
John and Walid, just to, you know, sort of build on that a little bit. I mean, you see this changing in terms of the amount of time it takes to develop a new technology and bring it to commercial scale. I mean, is that 10 to 15 years being compressed based on what you've seen over the past almost year?
It is, yeah. I think there are compressive drivers at play, certainly. I think that, you know, a big company like Walid's or like mine gives a small business reach and scale and scope. So it's attractive from that perspective. The more of these long-term operating contracts we have, the more outsourced water the industry wants. That leaves the technology choice to us. You know, so the industry then isn't so discerning whether they want fractionation or you know, whatever technology they want. They leave that to us. So I do see, you know, compression taking place.
Yeah, it is. It's being compressed. The only challenge is, as you mentioned, funding it. You know, so basically, if they are not willing to make it as a whole integrated strategy, then it will not really work, because all these new technologies, you have to fund them. You know, like if you compare, for example, to the pharmaceutical industry, where they invest around 15% of their revenues in R&D. You know, so it's a big gap compared to the water industry today.
And in some respects, you know, the industry has now made acquisition a surrogate for R&D, haven't we? You know, yeah. Few of us are it's true, you know, few of us are really practicing research, world-class research. We are developing, and then we'll use acquisition as a surrogate for R&D, you know, so we'll partner with universities, we'll partner with centers of excellence, and we'll buy business. You know, there's lots of, the startup ecosystems are vibrant. Yeah. You know, there are so many good ideas that have real merit.
Yeah, and it's a must, as you mentioned, John, because today the industry is very well regulated, so large-scale companies cannot really navigate. So when you are a small player, you can really navigate regulations to be able to bring a product to market, and then a larger scale organization can take it to market.
Exactly, and these markets are very ripe for disruption. They are ripe for disruption because anytime you see an oligopoly of a few major players, that's ripe for new entrants. It's ripe for disruptors.
Correct.
So where do you see the industry going then? There's lots of change happening, as everyone is in agreement with. So what does the water industry hold in the next 10, 15 years? And obviously we're sort of talking about the innovation side of things in particular. But yeah, what does the future hold for the water industry more generally?
Well, I hope we're going to go round and round in circles, literally. I hope that I hope this is no more linear. This isn't a linear world. This isn't a linear market. I hope that it's a circular market. So I hope we go round and round in circles. Look, many things are helping. Legislation's being passed, so you can't abstract groundwaters now. So you're forced to reuse and reclaim. As we see the value in the waste streams. And I read last week that Denmark has now we've seen sewage plants become, water reclamation facilities become, Denmark's now calling them factories where they can extract nutrients. So as we rethink about waste, that helps the entrepreneurs see value in it. So I think it'll start to move quickly now. I think we'll see an acceleration in change.
John, I think I want to quote you. That was a great way to put it.
You're welcome.
What I'm seeing also is that there are a lot of kind of a marriage between biotechnology and water. I mean, traditionally it used to be like water alone, and life science completely different. But today there are a lot of cross-pollination between both. So, for example, gene editing. You'd have never thought about gene editing to apply it in as bugs to go and selectively select some nutrients or metals and then try to encapsulate them and take them outside of the water. So there's one thing that is coming, and also digital water. We talk a lot about it, but it's a multitude of many things, and many tools, and we need to be specific in what we apply from the digital world, and not just talk about it, because it's kind of became like every CEO will talk about digital water, how it's doing digital water. It has to solve a problem, not just to be like a nice word to say. So I think digital and biotechnology is going to be more and more present in the water industry.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, so I agree with both of you. One thing I would add is, I think pretty clearly there's a move towards off-grid, localized systems. So, did we lose Walid?
No, I can still see him. Yeah. We just moved his head. That was a sign of life.
So, I view digital as, technology trend in itself, but also an enabler. Definitely. For, off-grid technologies, localized treatment systems. So really rethinking, the supply side and the treatment side.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think, Will, the point you make, the more we decentralize, the more we, you think about, we have infrastructure that's crumbling. We have water pipes that are aged. We have dams that are crumbling. Think about pumping water hundreds of miles. Think about the pressures you need, right? And then all of a sudden, why not make it locally? Why not? So decentralize, so that's surely the future. It's very hard to argue against that.
Correct. And again, it goes back to what we've been seeing over the past several months. Certainly, our food systems, there's now a lot more attention being paid to urban ag, indoor ag, what that means. So shortening those supply chains, and it's the same thing for water. So it's, what does a food shed, what does a watershed look like now? That gets us to something that's, I would say more intimate, more connected, more local, more resilient. To your point about circular, we have the ability to really deliver on a circular economy at a smaller scale.
Sure. And I think as we talk about footprint and handprint, look at the water footprint of what we eat, what we drink. I think that will push people away from things on 4 legs to things on 2 legs, to things on 1 leg, stuff that grows underground. I think fish have it, no question. I mean, I like steak, but you look at a pound of fish protein compared to a pound of steak protein, there's a huge difference in water footprint. And so it's that kind of driver which will push people to think about, contemplate these choices, and then that kind of macro force then affects markets. That will then lead to investment away from or into certain sectors.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And so as you both mentioned, in terms of resilience, I mean, when you're not pumping miles away your water, there is no risk of contamination, there is no risk of flooding, and so on.
Sure.
So taking out a component. Yeah.
Sure.
So do you think then that there is a distinct sort of lack of understanding, lack of education around the use of water generally?
But it's always been taken for granted, Lyle. It's always everyone's felt it's always been here. It's in plentiful supply, nothing to worry about. That's always been how we've always thought about it. As we go forward, things are changing, and several things, some things we've spoken to is causing that change. But I do think, there's much more awareness now than there's ever been.
Yeah, and I think also, like if you're working all your day in a refinery, let's say, or a power plant, I mean, you don't really have time to go and understand what's happening in terms of technologies and how your water usage can impact your operating cost in terms of asset protection, in terms of energy, in terms of chemical usages, and so on. So people don't really have the time to learn all the technologies and how they can improve their operations in an industrial setting. So definitely there is a lack of awareness, and we as a supplier and technologists need to continue educating and finding ways to promote sustainable ways within their industry.
And Walid, if you go back to Henry Ford, he was famously quoted, if he'd asked his customers what they want, they would want faster horses.
Correct. Correct. Definitely.
So it's difficult to ask people, the fact that we need to eliminate or reduce water from production, L'Oreal's concept of dry factories, which you guys know a lot about, is hugely important. So we have to change, the whole paradigm of the shift. We have to change how we think of water. Spray pads for recreational water, they were all designed to be once through. And then they realized how much water you use when you have a spray pad working once through. So now, as pools close down, spray pads emerge because they don't need lifeguards. Mm-hmm. But then the flows are recirculated. So you have to deal with all the animal droppings, the leaves. It becomes a whole different issue to treat the water then.
Correct. Yeah, the whole impact. Yeah.
Sure.
I think this is a really important point in terms of innovation, and that I think, clearly we've all been trained to engage, to get the voice of the customer. What do they want? And that's still important, but we have an opportunity to bring things to the table that create value for them in ways that they hadn't thought. And it's, I always like the joke that I didn't know I needed an iPhone until I got one. And, I wouldn't have asked for it, essentially. So
sure.
There's I think, a pretty significant opportunity here to deliver things, deliver solutions very broadly, including technologies that customers, consumers might not have thought of.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, it's true. And, you didn't know to ask for it, but now you can't live without it, can you?
Yeah.
So So what would you say that those solutions are then? I mean, we talk a lot about, like, say, digital solutions, be it sensoring or remote monitoring, and then there's obviously the whole reuse and recycle, the whole applications that follow that. So what would you say are the technology that is available? And, everybody mentions that it is available out on the market now, but what's going to have the biggest impact on consumption and sustainability moving forward?
I think it depends on each industry. So, for example, if you're operating in a refinery or in a food and beverage plant, so the technology will be different, but improvements will be the same. Either it's a reduction of cost or reduction of water consumption. And typically, it's not just the water consumption; it's all that is impacted by the water. So, I'll give you an example. In a refinery in Kuwait, back like almost 17 years ago, I was running a trial, and they had the issue of boiler shutdown issue and so on. So they had to shut down the refinery for 3 days. So imagine the losses of shutting down a refinery for 3 days. If you just had online monitoring of all their operating assets in the refinery, this would not have happened. So online monitoring is one solution. You have like technologies as mentioned by John, for example, ultrafiltration. You can really improve your cycles in your cooling towers, for example, and then by improving your cooling towers, you can improve your efficiency and your energy cost. So there are a lot of solutions, but it depends on the industry, and the more interaction you have, as Will was mentioning, like how we come to people and educate them about what they can leverage out of the technology, not the technology itself, because the technology is very basic today.
And look, Walid, something you said earlier on about gene sequencing. You think about the change in crop, creating crops that are more salt tolerant. We should be growing crops from seawater. Why on earth are we using, even reclaimed water for that? So that's the kind of they're the kind of changes that I see. I do see a very fundamental change now in our whole approach to water. I think we have to separate signal from noise. There's lots of noise, but the clear signal is we've got to preserve, protect, and reuse, because this is all we have.
I would I agree, and I would just add actionable information. So imagine the consumer having real-time water quality data in their home. Imagine the consumer understanding what real-time water quality was in their city, in their community. And, John, it goes back to your point about, the consumer and brands and so on driving change.
Sure.
Right now there's no shortage of data, but, turning it into something that the layperson can act upon to drive public policy change and, engagement with the private sector and NGOs, I think, there's nothing. I absolutely believe that's an enormous opportunity.
Sure. I agree.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Well, I think that sort of is a good point to sort of move on to some of the questions that have been sent in. The first one is from Grant Thornley, and he mentions that regarding the reuse policy, what are the main barriers, should I say, the barriers and obstacles for getting more municipalities, more utilities, and more industries to actually embrace reuse and recycling?
I think one of the big barriers are the infrastructure. Of course, you have the people's mindset, but also infrastructure. You need to build pipelines to deliver, again, this water reuse. But the more you move to circular water, as Will was mentioning, the more you don't need all this infrastructure, because it's just you're using the water where you are. Either it's for agriculture, like small greenhouses, or for other applications. So this can be one of the barriers.
And I think we have to help people understand that this isn't a situation where they can't afford to do it. They can't afford not to do it. We have to completely change the emphasis. This must become the norm. When we start to build direct potable reclaim facilities, in small communities, the politicians have to be the first to drink it. When we seriously, because how will the people ever follow them if the leaders don't step up and drink it? When we commission these facilities, I'm often the first to drink it because I know it's safe. But it's not the professionals, the technicians. It's the media who, toilet to tap is the hurdle we have to get over. The science is very settled in this area. We know it's safe. So we have to allow people. It's perception. It's the point well made. It's getting the people to change their behaviors.
Yeah.
I would just add, and John, I think you had 3 of my favorite quotes now. So language matters, and as professionals, I would like to see us not talk about the drought, because if we continue to talk about the drought, then everyone hopes that it's going to rain and life will be good. Day zero is really about public policy failure, and there's no reason for it. And, things like, toilet to tap. I mean, I like Singapore's approach. It's new water. So, how do you change, the branding of these issues and engage people in a more positive view that we can solve water challenges, as opposed to things like the sky is falling, we have day zero. It's, we can do better.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. And there's another question here then from Craig, who mentioned in reference to the outsourced water services that we're seeing more and more of. Does that shift the scrutiny a little bit away from how sustainable a particular company is?
I wouldn't think so. I think it's more, it will show a dedication of the company to find the right partner to address their water issues, and make it more sustainable, because they will bring in expertise, financing, capabilities to make sure that the water is well treated and the whole cycle is sustainable. I think we're losing Will, most probably.
I don't think I caught the question. So, Lyle, can you repeat it, perhaps?
Yeah. It was a question regarding the outsourced water services, and if using an outsourced provider, if that shifts the scrutiny, if everybody's trying to work to a sort of collective goal, does bringing in a provider to manage your water shift the attention to them as opposed to the company itself, in terms of the actual scrutiny side of things?
Sorry, well, you go ahead.
No, John, you go. I'll go after you.
Look, it certainly places the bar is very high, Lyle. The burden is immense. If you are responsible for providing water to a certain standard, a certain specification, there are punitive damages for getting it wrong. These users have to be up all the time. There's no downtime. So you have to build in redundancies. You have to build in very safe ways of working. You have to be, you have to use an abundance of caution with all these processes. For sure, it is. There's no simple answer, and it is not for everybody. Some people won't want to outsource the water, but I say to them, look, how many of you build your own power stations? You buy power this way. You buy telephone services this way. Water is another utility. You've got to see it like that.
And this whole notion of water as a service and outsourcing, companies don't outsource responsibility. They assume responsibility increasingly for their supply chain.
Yeah.
And, there's a brand associated with that. So it's not one or the other, it's really both now. So as a service provider, a technology provider, you're under a lot of scrutiny because you're suddenly part of that industrial private sector brand.
Yeah, I think we may be having a few connection issues. There's another question here from Michael, and it says, with the need for innovation across so many segments, across the water industry, why does there appear to be such resistance in adopting and embracing new technology?
I think the industry is conservative. The industry is very conservative. It's very slow to move. It has people's health at stake. So it's, if we look at where the value is, there's more value in wastewater than there is in drinking water. In many respects, the value is left drinking water because it's so commoditized.
Yeah.
But really the industry is so conservative. Nobody wants to be first. That the risk and the reward ratios are profoundly skewed. There's very little reward for massive risk. Mm. And so people always tread carefully, and they want to, nobody quite rightly believes you. They want to see it. Don't tell me, show me. So piloting, studies, good science, strong experimental design, that takes time. You can't rush that.
Yeah, and it's due to the fact that regulators are strict, so if you are a water plant, you have risk of being fined and heavily, so unless you show that you've got proof that it was working elsewhere, there is no way you can protect yourself. Mm-hmm. This is one of the challenges.
Yeah,
I agree. We're definitely in the prove it phase, not phase, but that's really where we're at. It's, a good pitch deck is not going to get it done.
Sure.
Prove it to me. Show me where you have deployed this and what the results are in a very transparent way. I think that's absolutely critical to it. And, in working with water technology startups, really the competition is the status quo. It's not another company in the sector. It is, and that's a daunting challenge to move. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. No.
I mean, further to that then, Will, I mean, we've mentioned the L'Oreal dry factory, which is an almost entirely, it's a reuse facility, isn't it? That all their processed water is reused. So when you have references like that, and when you have examples like that, what's then stopping other companies, adopting that kind of technology? Like I say, that is the reference, isn't it? That is the example of how the technology works and the benefits that would come from it.
Mm-hmm. So is that a question to the group?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, you can kick us off, Will, and then we can open it up.
From a corporate water stewardship, water strategy perspective, companies are, to varying degrees, trying to figure out how to deliver on their commitments and how to deliver a more sustainable and resilient business. The challenge I see is, how do they understand what's out there in the world of technology innovation and business model innovation and bring that into their organization in a faster, more effective way? And speed's a challenge. And I view that as an opportunity, but it is the slow process of understanding what's out in the marketplace through traditional methods and programs versus, okay, we need to accelerate that now. We need to engage with a different group of stakeholders and basically test, pilot, vet technologies in a safe way, in a low risk way. So,
and Will, something you said a little while ago, it resonates with me. This is about being able to narrate a story. We have to tell the story. The digital transformation, we're taking people to somewhere they've never been before. So we have to tell a story. We have to show them. If people like your conclusion, they generally embrace your logic. Right?
Yeah, right.
So, so we have to paint conclusions that they like, that are inspiring. Then we have to show them each step of the way along the journey how they get there. So we show them what the end state looks like, and then we show them what the state before that looks like, and then that guides them to the first step they should take.
And we need to raise the discussion to a higher level, because typically today, the water suppliers, they go and talk to the operations team or, like the engineering team, while it's not really anymore a technical problem. It's more an umbrella on the company level, and this is where we need to elevate the discussion also and tell the story.
Yeah, no, certainly. So we've got time for one last question, and it's from Vishal, who mentions zero liquid discharge and treatment of industrial wastewater. Do you see that becoming a widely adopted regulatory requirement in the future?
Look, I think ZLD is frightfully expensive. I think we'll see more MLD, more NZLD. I think getting all the way up that curve, like Lyle, is hugely expensive. There are degrees. It's a curve. It's a process. So yes, we'll see more ZLD for sure, but everyone won't go to ZLD. Everyone will go to some. It'll be a process.
Yeah, correct. Because the more you go towards the end of the curve, it's become exponential in terms of cost.
Sure.
I would agree with that, and what I would propose is that we think about this as a transformation maturity model in terms of where are we at now, what are the options in terms of where we're going to go, and then what's appropriate for your business and your industry sector. It doesn't have to be that endpoint. It has to be an appropriate point on the transformation curve.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that is a good place to leave it. I'm very conscious of time and appreciate you guys will have other things to be getting on with. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much to our panel. So thank you very much, Will, John, and Walid. It's been great to have you. Thank you to Smart Water Magazine. They're our partner for this. Thank you all for joining in. We've had people from Crowdcast and LinkedIn. Sorry if we didn't get through to any questions that may have been posted. And yeah, for any further content, you can go onto searchingindustrial.com for any more water-related content. But yeah, no, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been great.
Thank you, Lyle. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank
you, everyone.
See you, Walid.
You all.
Great being with you.
Cheers. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.